Mr. Speaker, on July 11th, Donald Trump Jr. released a series of emails regarding his meeting with a Russian government lawyer and an individual associated with the Russian intelligence. Don Jr.'s emails are a smoking gun. They prove that the Trump campaign was not only aware of the Russian government's efforts to meddle in our elections, they were enthusiastic about accepting Russian support. What follows are the contents of those emails. They paint a disturbing picture of a campaign and now an administration willing to break the law and sell out to an adversary of the United States in order to advance their own petty interests. Our hope is that the American people will carefully consider the content of these messages and what they say about the fitness of Donald Trump and his senior advisors to hold high office. We'll begin. This comment posted by Donald Trump Jr. on Twitter on July 11th, 2017. To everyone, in order to be totally transparent, which we now know he wasn't even in this email, I'm releasing the entire email chain of my emails with Rob Goldstone about the meeting on June 9th, 2016. The first email on June 3rd, 2016 was from Rob, who was relating a request from Emin, a person I knew from the 2013 Miss Universe pageant near Moscow. Emin and his father have a very highly respected company in Moscow. The information they suggested they had about Hillary Clinton I thought was political opposition research. I first wanted to just have a phone call, but when that didn't work out, they said the woman would be in New York and asked if I would meet. I decided to take that meeting. The woman, as she has publicly said, was not a government official. And as we have said, she had no information to provide and wanted to talk about the adoption policy and the Magnitsky Act. To put this in context, this occurred before the current Russian fever was in vogue. As Rob Goldstone said just today in the press, the entire meeting was the most inane nonsense I've ever heard, and I was actually agitated by it. End of email.
I'm Congressman Ted Lieu, and I'm going to be reading the email portions of Rob Goldstone to Donald Trump Jr. On June 3, 2016, at 10:36 a.m., Rob Goldstone wrote to Donald Trump Jr. the following. Good morning. Emin just called and asked me to contact you with something very interesting. The Crown Prosecutor of Russia met with his father, Aris, this morning, and in their meeting offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia and would be very useful to your father. This is obviously very high-level and sensitive information, but is part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump, helped along by Aris and Emin. What do you think is the best way to handle this information, and would you be able to speak to Emin about it directly? I can also send this info to your father via Rona, but it is ultra-sensitive, so wanted to send to you first. Best, Rob Goldstone.
On June 3rd, 2016, at 10:53 a.m., less than 20 minutes after that email, Donald Trump Jr. wrote back, "Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that. I am on the road at the moment, but perhaps I just speak to Emin first. Seems we have some time, and if it's what you say is, I love it, especially later in the summer. Could we do a call first thing next week when I am back? Best, Don." Mr. Speaker, I love it. His response was, I love it. I've worked in politics for a long time. I've never been approached with information from a foreign government. But if I were, my response would not be, I love it. My response would be, this is completely inappropriate. My response would be, don't ever contact me again. My response would be, I am calling the FBI. In this email, Donald Trump Jr. showed his true colors. This email proves that he lacks basic integrity, and the willingness of Jared Kushner to attend that meeting proves that he, too, is no patriot.
After we finish reading these emails into the congressional record, we're going to discuss why it's a straight-up violation of the Federal Election Campaign Act. So on Monday, June 6, 2016, Rob Goldstone writes back to Donald Trump Jr. an email at 12:40 p.m. with the subject heading, regarding Russia Clinton, private and confidential. Hi, Don. Let me know when you're free to talk with Emin by phone about this Hillary info. You had mentioned early this week, so wanted to try to schedule a time and day. Best to you and family, Rob Goldstone.
On June 16, 2016, at 3 p.m., Donald Trump Jr. wrote back, "Rob, could we speak now? D."
And then Rob Goldstone replies to Donald Trump Jr. that same day at 3:37 p.m., "Let me track him down in Moscow. What number should he call?" By the way, any email that sort of says tracking someone down in Moscow might just raise some red flags. All right.
On June 6, 2016, at 3:38 p.m., Donald Trump Jr. wrote back, "My cell number," we have omitted that cell number. Unlike Donald Trump, we do not give out individual cell numbers. "Thanks, D."
And then Rob Goldstone replies, "Okay, he's on stage in Moscow, but should be off within 20 minutes, so I'm sure he can call Rob."
On June 6, 2016, just a few minutes after receiving this email, Donald Trump Jr. wrote back, "Rob, thanks for the help." From Moscow, thanks for the help, he should have said.
The next day, on June 7, 2016, at 4:20 p.m., Rob Goldstone writes, "Don, hope all is well. Emmett asked I schedule a meeting with you and the Russian government attorney who is flying over from Moscow for this Thursday. I believe you are aware of the meeting and so wonder if 3 p.m. or later on Thursday works for you. I assume it would be at your office. Best, Rob Goldstone."
On June 7, 2016, at 5:16 p.m., Donald Trump Jr. writes, "How about 3 at our office? Thanks, Rob. Appreciate your help setting this up."
Later that same day, on June 7, 2016, Rob Goldstone wrote back to Donald Trump Jr., "Perfect. Won't sit in on the meeting, but we'll bring them at 3 p.m. and introduce you, etc. I will send the names of the 2 people meeting with you for security when I have them later today. Best, Rob." By the way, we now know today that one of those names just happens to be a Soviet counterintelligence officer. Go ahead.
On June 7, 2016, at 6:14 p.m., Donald Trump Jr. writes, "Great. It would likely be Paul Manafort, quotes, campaign boss, my brother-in-law, Jared Kushner, and me, 725 Fifth Avenue, 25th floor," which is Trump Tower.
On June 8th, the next day at 10:34 a.m., Rob Goldstone writes back to Donald Trump Jr., "Good morning. Would it be possible to move tomorrow's meeting to 4 p.m. as the Russian attorney is in court until 3? I was just informed. Best, Rob."
On June 8, 2016, at 11:15, Donald Trump Jr. writes, "Yes, Rob, I could do that unless you wanted to do 3 today instead. Just let me know and I'll lock it in either way." That's some eagerness that this man has for this information.
On Wednesday, June 8th at 11:18 a.m., Rob Goldstone writes back, "They can't do today as she hasn't landed yet from Moscow. 4 p.m. is great tomorrow. Best, Rob."
This email is from Donald Trump Jr., sent Wednesday, June 8th, 2016 at 12:03 p.m. to Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort. Subject, forward, Russian, Clinton, private and confidential. Meeting got moved to 4 tomorrow at my offices. Best, Don.
So that completes the email chain. And under federal law, under the Federal Election Campaign Act, you cannot solicit or accept any contribution from a foreign national or foreign country. And the law defines a contribution not as just a monetary donation, but anything of value, in-kind donation, opposition research, anything of value violates the law. And in this case, we absolutely have conspiracy to violate the Federal Election Campaign Act. I'm a former prosecutor. I know it's very easy to prove a charge of conspiracy. You just have to have the person take one act in furtherance of the conspiracy. So in this case, when Donald Trump Jr. replies back to the offer of this incriminating information on Hillary Clinton and says, "I love it," that's one act. He then proceeds to set up a meeting. That's another act. He then shows up at the meeting with Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort. That's a third act. That more than completes a crime of conspiracy. And we have in black and white right here a violation of federal law.
The other thing that we have to consider is this. Right now, there is a person that is in the White House that has lied on their security clearance. a security clearance that we use to determine whether we shall trust somebody with these top secret information for this country. Jared Kushner was in a meeting with a foreign agent. Now we know that he was in a meeting not just with a foreign agent, but a former and quote-unquote former Soviet counterintelligence officer. Let me tell you something. There is no such thing as former counterintelligence officers if you ever worked for the Soviets. Once you're in the KGB, you're always in the KGB. Why was that person in that room? It was not to talk about adoption. It certainly wasn't there to talk about anything else. But if anything, it was there to pass information. And the fact that Jared Kushner lied in his clearance, lied and omitted it until finally revealed today, really caused him to question whether that man should be in the White House right now and trusted with this type of sensitive information. Ted, you and I were in the military. We both had security clearances. If we had this type of omission in our security clearance, what would have been our punishment?
Our security clearance would have been suspended immediately. An investigation would have been opened. And I'm glad you mentioned Jared Kushner, because many of us are wondering, why does he still have a security clearance? Why is he even in the White House? And let's just sort of walk through a little bit of what happened with his security clearance. On the very first security clearance form, known as a SF-86 form, he lied on it. He did not disclose a single meeting with the Russians. If you read the form, it says, if you make a false statement or omit material facts, you can be imprisoned. He omitted all that information. He is then confronted, and what does he do? He revises it. So then he submits a second security clearance form. Now it turns out he lied on that one too, because he did not disclose this latest meeting that happened to be with a Russian counterintelligence officer. So then he had to submit a third form. And when you look at his explanation, according to media reports, he said that his staff hit the send button too soon. Well, both Representative Gallego and I know that that's not how you submit the security clearance form. It's a pretty involved, elaborate process. You have to do this certification. Not only do you have to send it electronically, then you have to sign the paper and submit that with your signature on it. Very elaborate. So now he is lying about the process in which he lied on the 3 security clearance forms. We don't know why he still has security clearance. We don't know why he's even in the White House.
What is the motivation for omitting this meeting? There's clearly emails. There's clearly pointed emails saying, why are you going to be attending this meeting? There is a subject line that says Clinton emails. There is a subject line that has to do with a Russian agent, a Crown prosecutor. And now we know there is a former Soviet counterintelligence agent that just happens to be there. And Jared Kushner omits it from his security clearance. That is not an accident. That is a criminal act. A criminal act that any other citizen in this country, any other soldier, sailor, Marine, airman, if we ever did that, we would be quickly prosecuted under the UCMJ. No. I'm controlling time.
So let me follow up with what Representative Gallegos said. We have a person in the White House now with a security clearance, even though he's lied on at least 2 of those forms. So there absolutely needs to be an investigation. That security clearance needs to be suspended immediately. But also, for any intelligence official watching this or reading about this, how can you trust Jared Kushner when he lied on these security clearance forms and makes a mockery of the process? And keep in mind, this is the same person that suggested setting up a secret back channel with the Russians at the Russian embassy. So the only reason you would want to use Russian equipment at the Russian embassy is to hide information from U.S. intelligence. So even if his security clearance is not suspended, I really hope that people working for him do not trust him.
If you start saying and putting it all together, we now know that there is a clear narrative of Jared Kushner involvements with the Russians. First, he tries to set up a back channel. Then he omits his conversations and meetings in his security clearance. He continues to lie, even though he is continuously brought forth as being untruthful. And now we find ourselves in a situation where there is basically zero trust that this man in the White House with top secret clearance is not compromised. In conclusion, let me close this. You just heard emails after emails. Imagine this conversation happening the opposite way. Imagine a conversation happening with a Democrat or the Clintons saying, I have information, and the word Moscow is said 40, probably 4 or 5 times altogether. Imagine the idea that you're meeting in private, and then imagine all the follow-up lies that happened. What would be occurring right now? What would be occurring is what we saw last year, consistent oversight. But there is none. There is no oversight right now. Paul Ryan has not taken this by the helm and has not done any type of oversight. The House Republicans have abdicated their responsibility and have allowed Donald Trump and all those other members of his family and the administration that have been compromised to continue being a threat to our national security in the White House. This should not be the way. Partisanship should never be above patriotism. But what we are seeing right now is naked partisanship being exposed and pushed as far as possible in the hopes of protecting a faulty president, his administration, and his family. That is not American. That is not what any of us ever signed up for to do. We swore, whether it was in the Armed Services Committee, whether it was when we were in the Armed Services, whether it's when we came here to Congress, to uphold the Constitution of the United States and protect it. Right now, we can honestly say that that is not occurring. There's an absolute abdication happening right now of leadership from House Republicans. Ted, please.
Thank you. And let me conclude by saying that the president said that most people would have taken this meeting. That's just not true. Again, under the Federal Election Campaign Act, if you solicit or conspire to solicit or show up at a meeting where you expect to get opposition research from a foreign national, that's a violation of federal law. So in fact, most people would not have taken this meeting unless they were crooked. And we have an example here of what happened when the Al Gore campaign got information. They were sent anonymously, briefing notes and things that then Bush was being briefed on and so on. They took that package and they turned it over to the FBI. That's what should have happened in this case. And let me sort of conclude as well with thanking Representative Gallego. And this is a pretty big deal. We have people in the White House that believe they're above the law, and the lesson in Watergate is that no one is above the law.
Thank you. I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. The chair would remind members to direct all remarks to the chair and to formally yield and reclaim time when under recognition. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2017, the chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrabacher, for 30 minutes.
I'm sorry that my two colleagues refused to yield any time when you're talking, especially when they're using phrases like naked partisanship. That's very interesting, isn't it? When we could have had a nice dialogue here, and I was asking for a chance to go into a dialogue so the American people could understand what was being said rather than these incredible naked partisanship of people who disagree, but I won't yield my time to have a dialogue about it. I'm afraid that doesn't cut it. This is yet another example of what we have seen of people using sinister sounding descriptions in order to basically distract us from some of the corruption, and I might add, questionable activities of their own presidential candidate in the last election, who was defeated because the American people did not trust that candidate. And by the way, I would like to have asked, I'm sorry that my friends have left and wouldn't yield any time for a question, whether or not they believe that Hillary Clinton's activities in Russia while she was a government official was she involved in money raising from Russian oligarchs to the tune of millions, tens of millions of dollars? Did she actually, was her husband involved in raising this money while she was Secretary of State or while she was a candidate for President of the United States over in Russia? Millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation, and I understand even hundreds of thousands of dollars put in her husband's pocket for a speech that he gave in Russia. No, these things need to be looked at. But instead, what we're hearing about is sinister sounding words about a meeting where someone said they had some information that would help, yes, the campaign. But the reason it would help the campaign is it was demonstrated that there was supposedly information that showed that Hillary Clinton was involved in some activity that was contrary to the interests of the United States or contrary to the law. And yes, if someone says to you that they want to give you information, there is nothing wrong with that. In fact, I would hope that my colleagues who called us, who just said this, what's happening on our side of the aisle is naked partisanship. Well, I wonder if the Democratic Party and my other colleagues in this body are calling for Hillary to release all of her emails and to make sure that we have under oath an explanation of these transactions to the Clinton Foundation. But instead, we're hearing all sorts of sinister descriptions of a meeting that was going to give information. I will tell you right now, everybody in this body, if they think that there can be information that's important for our country to know from any foreigner, we should talk to them and find out what it is. And it is not illegal to receive information from someone, especially if you are engaged in an activity that's aimed at trying to secure understanding for policies that you plan to implement as a leader in the United States, as an elected leader. Now, this is absolutely, there's nothing wrong with, by the way, I am the chairman of the Asian and Europe and Eurasian subcommittee, including emerging threats. So in my jurisdiction is Russia. Should I ever turn down a chance to talk to somebody who has information for me, negative or positive, about Russia? No, I shouldn't. And neither should the Trump campaign have ignored any opportunity to receive more information about what was being done by Hillary, perhaps, and the raising of the millions of dollars for the Hillary Foundation. So that was a legitimate thing to ask and see. And then you determine, is the information accurate or is it not accurate? If it's not accurate, you don't want to touch it. But if you get accurate information, the Democrats were, I shouldn't say the Democrats, many people were disturbed that there had been a release of emails during the campaign. And a lot of the question about this whole Russia issue is whether Russia or somebody else actually hacked in to the system and released those emails. I think what's important is only whether truth was revealed. If someone was talking about releasing negative and false information, the public should be upset about that. But they should not be upset if they are being given a chance to see more information that is accurate information on this issue. So I would hope the American people, and I trust that the American people are smart enough to see a diversionary tactic using sinister words over and over again to describe something that is perfectly legal, and in some cases, as I say, talking to anybody to get more information to help you make your decisions, that's a good thing and not a bad thing. I would yield to my colleague from Texas.
I appreciate so much my very good friend from California, with whom I've traveled abroad and had some amazing meetings with representatives of countries around the world. And as I listened to our friends from the other side talk about this issue, it appears very clear what they're saying is every member of the House who has ever met with someone from a foreign country and asked questions, whether they believed what they were given or not, is guilty of a crime and should be damned to hell for all eternity. Is basically is that my friend's impression?
It seems to me that that's what's being said, and it's being presented as because those people are so sinister, you don't listen to them, or the whole act is sinister because it may be illegal. But in reality, we're talking about one person meeting with another who may have information, and we in the Congress and anyone running for public office should be listening and seeing, is there information that is imparted that's important for our country to know.
And the gentleman yield. I appreciate the fact that gentleman from California and I have met with he was then the leader of Iraq. Neither the gentleman from California nor I cared for the man. He was prime minister of Iraq. He did a great deal of damage to Iraq. He, along with our President Obama, dramatically weakened Iraq. Prime Minister Maliki, I know my friend recalls our conversation with him, but we were asking for answers to questions that we considered very serious. For example, I was asking about his commitment to protect the refugees from Iran that he had pledged to protect. And my friend from California was asking about the Iraqi pledge to help pay us back for some of our costs in making Iraq free. And those two issues so infuriated Prime Minister Maliki, we got word later when we were on C-130 that we were being banned from Iraq by the Prime Minister. But to hear our friends across the aisle talk, every time one of them and every time one of us on this side of the aisle have asked, even people we considered to be despicable and done terrible things, we wanted answers that we were committing a crime in demanding those answers. I also know my friend from California got similar treatment from a man we believed was very corrupt as the leader of Afghanistan at the time. I don't find any crime or any harm in asking questions and getting answers, even from people that for whom we have no respect. So I appreciate the gentleman from California yielding. I think it's a good thing if somebody's got information, even if you don't care for them, to try to get that answers to our questions.
Well, we know now people are trying to frighten us and others not to meet with people and not to talk to people. And I wonder why. As far as I'm concerned, I do not have just a blind trust in whatever our intelligence agencies give us. And let me note, many of the things that are being quoted aren't even being quoted from our intelligence agencies during this whole national discussion on what Russia's interaction with us has been for the last couple of years. The fact is that these intelligence reports are filled with weasel words, and a weasel word is just making it sound like you're saying something, but you put a phrase in that actually doesn't commit you to defending that particular position as being factual. So with that said, I would hope that the American people pay close attention to the sinister words, but also the weasel words, and pay attention to the basic nonsense in telling us that, a horrible crime has been committed now because someone in the Trump campaign, whoever it was, I don't care if it was Donald Trump's relatives or his son or whoever it was, anybody wants to have in the campaign whatsoever wants to talk to anybody in the world to get information. I think that's a good thing. And now whether or not at that point that has to be determined whether it's accurate information. To move forward with inaccurate information is wrong, but that's your job too, is to verify what somebody's telling you before you let it influence your policy making or the decisions that you're making at that moment.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal.